A theory that took shape in the late 1980s was peacekeeping criminology, with its roots in Christian and Eastern philosophies. It advances the notion that social control agencies and the citizens that serve should work together to alleviate social problems and human suffering and thus reduce the crime. It's also called the compassionate criminology. It includes the notion of services to others and suggests that compassion, wisdom, and love are essential for understanding the suffering of which we're all a part of, and for practicing of criminology and nonviolence. So peacekeeping criminology is to promote a peaceful, just society. Punitive crime control strategies don't work, and we have to favor humanistic conflict resolutions to prevent and control crime. And before I jump into restorative justice, these are the theories that we have reviewed in this chapter. Nice little chart you can refer to, condenses them down in a nice picture. The restorative justice system takes aim at resolving conflicts and relies on non-punitive ways to control crime. So what is it? Basically is a system of criminal justice which focuses on the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims and the community at large. The use of dispute resolution process is what they use: mediation, negotiating, with regards to the crimes. Who's involved? The offender, the victims. As you may be aware of, the offender, and if not, I'm going to tell you right now, the offender and the victim normally, in most cases, have a relationship or know each other. And the goal is to address and resolve the issues that produce the conflict between them, rather than treat them and label them as victim and criminal. The point being that society should reconcile the parties, not choose who to punish. A restorative justice program aims to get offenders to take responsibility for their actions, to understand the harm they have caused, to give them an opportunity to redeem themselves, and to discourage them from causing further harm. For victims, it's a goal to give them an active role in the process and to reduce feelings of anxiety and powerlessness. Restorative justice is founded on an alternative theory to the traditional methods of justice, which often focus on retribution. However, restorative justice programs can complement those traditional methods as well. What's the process? According to criminologist John Braithwaite, restorative justice is a process where all stakeholders, and who are stakeholders: offender, victim, those affected by the criminal act, the family, school, workplace. The stakeholders affected by an injustice have an opportunity to discuss how they have been affected by the injustice and to decide what should be done to repair the harm. With crime, restorative justice is about the idea that because crime hurts, justice should heal. It follows that conversations with those who have been hurt and with those who have inflicted the harm must be central to the process. Although law professionals may have secondary roles in facilitating the restorative justice process, it is the citizens who must take up the majority of the responsibility in healing the pains caused by crime. The process of restorative justice then shifts the responsibility for addressing crime. Sentencing circles, sometimes called peacemaking circles, use traditional circle ritual and structure to involve all interested parties. The procedure commonly works as follows. The offender applies for the intervention. A healing circle is held for the victim. A healing circle is held for the offender. A sentencing circle is held, and finally follow-up circles to monitor progress. Restorative justice differs from traditional criminal justice in terms of the guiding questions that it asks. In restorative justice, the questions are: who has been hurt? What are the needs? Whose obligations are these? What are the causes? Who has a stake in the situation? What is the appropriate process to involve stakeholders in an effort to address causes and put things right? In contrast, our traditional criminal justice asks what laws have been broken, who did it, what does or do the offenders deserve. Restorative justice is used throughout the world and has been implemented and embraced on many levels in our justice system. In statewide offenses, in criminal cases, victims can testify about the crime's impact on their lives, receive answers to questions about the incident, and participate in holding the offender accountable. Meanwhile, offenders can tell their story of why the crime occurred and how it has affected their lives. They are given an opportunity to compensate the victim directly to the degree possible. In criminal cases, this can include money, community service in general, or something that's specific to the offense, education to prevent repeat offending, or even an expression of remorse. In the community, concerned individuals meet with all parties to assess the experience and impact of the crime. Offenders listen to victims' experiences, preferably until they are able to empathize with the experience. Then they speak to their own experience, how they decide to commit the offense. A plan is made for prevention of future occurrences, and the offender to address the damage to the injured parties. And everyone has to agree. Community members hold the offender or the offenders accountable for their plan. In prisons, besides serving as an alternative to civil or criminal trial, restorative justice is also thought to be applicable to offenders who are currently incarcerated. The purpose of restorative justice in prisons is to assist with the prisoner's rehabilitation and eventually reintegration into society. By repairing the harm to the relationships between offenders and victims and offenders in the community that resulted from the crime, restorative justice seeks to understand and address the circumstances which contributed to the crime. This is thought to prevent those from reoffending. In social work cases, impoverished victims such as foster children are given the opportunity to describe their future hopes and make concrete plans to transition out of state custody and in a group process with their supporters. In social justice cases, restorative justice is used for problem solving. In schools, restorative justice has been implemented in schools. It uses a similar model to programs used in the criminal justice system. Restorative practices can also include preventative measures designed to build skills and capacity in students as well as adults. Some examples of preventative measures in restorative practices might include teachers and students devising classroom expectations together or setting up community building in the classroom. Restorative justice also focuses on justice as needs and obligations, expands justice as conversations between the offender, victim, and the school, and recognizes accountability as understanding the impact of actions and repairing the harm. In this approach, teachers, students, and the community can reach agreements to meet all stakeholders' needs. And collectively, it's emphasized as the group must create an action plan to heal the harm and find a way to bring the offender back into the community. So restorative justice, it's a new concept. It is out there. It's, working in some instances, but it does have its challenges. Some question whether or not restorative justice is a political movement or just a treatment process. Some view it as a social movement rather than rehabilitation. And can it really survive and focus on security? It must be wary of cultural and social differences with restorative justice. What might be restorative in one subculture might be insulting or damaging in another. Also, another challenge is there's really no one single definition that constitutes restorative justice. It's hard to balance the needs of offenders and victims. Too much focus on one stakeholder over another or others loses the risk of assessing needs and increasing the risk of reoffending. benefits may work only in the short term, but don't take into account long-term treatment needs that an offender might need. Some other challenges: it minimizes the seriousness of the crime. That's one, a very big challenge. It's actually not in the book, but I believe that this is a very big one, and it's written in other materials on this issue. And consider the example of domestic violence, right? If we keep going back to restorative justice and talking about it and how does it make me feel, are we really taking into account the long-term treatment? And are we fixing the issue? So that completes our discussion of Chapter 8, as well as our discussion on the theories that cause crime. Next time we're going to roll into talking about actual crimes.